start off, we must ask the essential question, who is this woman? To answer it, we're going to have to look inside the narrative of the story itself for clues. Now, some things we know. First, it says that she is a Samaritan. And the backstory between the Jews and the Samaritans, it's like a really rough story. So to understand this passage better, we can do a little fun history lesson real quick, because that history is what makes this passage come alive and give us some understanding as to its probable meaning. So let's dive into a little bit of history lesson here, but I won't get too nerdy on you, I promise. Now let's rewind to the year 1450 BC. Okay, we went from like 30 all the way back to 1450 BC, long time. People of God left Egypt and headed into the wilderness following Moses, and then conquered the promised land by about 1400, 50 years later. They have this king now. 50 years after conquering the promised land, they have a king. They're officially a world power on the political stage. Then they go through a civil war and break into northern Israel and southern Judea. And it was actually over the issues of taxes and labor abuse. Not much has changed in the world, I guess. Then a northern global superpower called Assyria invaded that northern Israel and conquered it in 722 BC. And they deported many of those people up to Syria. And then they attempted to blend the Hebrew-Assyrian cultures together to kind of annihilate everybody, for those who kind of remained. But those who fought to hold on to their Torah roots were known as Samaritans, and their name actually means guardians. They're like the holders of what was true. And they believed themselves to be the guardians of the true religion given by God to Abraham and Moses. However, the southern Judeans believed themselves to be the true keepers of the pure religion, and thus this animosity between the two groups developed. Now, especially around geography, because the Samaritans believed the true place to worship God was on a place called Mount Gerizim, while the Judeans believed it was in the city of Jerusalem. I mean, they had a big old temple there, so that's convenient. Now, both groups, they built temples of worship in these locations. And when the Greeks came to town and took over everything in order to standardize all worship and culture into like one thing that worshiped their king, King Antiochus, as a god, the Jews revolted. But the Samaritans, they just kind of like washed their hands of the whole matter, and they did not lend help to their southern Judean neighbors. And they actually told the Greeks, hey, we're not Jewish, so you could just leave us out of this. And it was a pretty nasty war. Now, after the Greeks were finally fended off by the Judeans under the Maccabean revolts, and then the temple was rededicated, a group of Judeans led by John Hyrcanus invaded Samaria and destroyed towns and the beloved temple on Mount Gerizim. So then hatred in their hearts brewed, and in retaliation, a band of Samaritans right around the time of Christ's birth invaded the Jerusalem temple and scattered human bones around, totally desecrating it. And thus, the hatred between these two people just kept growing and growing and growing over the centuries. So this explains why the woman is so surprised that a Jewish man was speaking to her. She's in exile from the Jewish community by ethnicity. But if you also notice, she's coming to the well in the heat of the day when all the other women of the town came first thing in the morning when the heat was less intense. So there's some animosity here between her and also the rest of the villages as well. So she's an exiled woman among an already exiled people. She's like twice exiled. And we tend to use this exiling people as a way of getting conformity, like do this or else. And it takes great courage to act in a way true to your own soul, but contrary to the community. Much of the time, community standards bring stability and structure, and that is needed, but sometimes when your community is practicing injustice en masse, you need to step out on your own 2 feet and do something about it. And that is what this woman does. And she stands as a model of courage. And we're going to explore how in the next section. So stick with me here.